First up is Dale Pallister. I'm very pleased to introduce Dale as the first speaker for tonight. Dale owns a feedlot operation near Dundalk in Grey County. He farms with his wife Linda, daughter Lisa, and son Chris, whom you've heard from on the topic of buck management during the very first Newsfeed Live webinar. And his grandchildren are also involved in the operation. The Pallisters produce about 13 million pounds of beef per year. They crop about 5,000 acres and pasture yearlings on land they own and rent on Manitoulin Island. The family farm has been in the same name for 150 years, and there have been 7 generations working on this same homestead. So you're going to hear more about Dale's operation, but I think it's important to point out that Dale has held many leadership roles within the beef industry, and he modestly omitted this information from his bio. He is past president of Beef Farmers of Ontario, was a founding board member of the Ontario Cattle Feeders Association, is past president of the Ontario Cattle Feeders Association, past chair of the Ontario Corn-Fed Beef Program, and has served on many other industry committees. So welcome, Dale, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me to participate in this. I appreciate the opportunity. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is the topic that we're addressing is risk. And I will say that maybe what works on our farm won't work on anybody else's. Maybe it will and maybe it won't, but this is what has worked for us. And I'll just kind of give a highlight what we've done and what we do to mitigate some risk and how we do some other things on our operation. As was mentioned, I'm been involved in the beef business for quite a few years. I guess if you go back, I graduated from Guelph in '74. And that's the year that I come home from Guelph and we built our first feedlot. Dad and I formed a partnership in 1974, built our first feedlot, which was for 200 head. At that time, we had cows and calves, were background in cattle with square bales of hay and 5-gallon pails of chop. We built our first tower silo and feedlot system in '74, and then expanded from then. And that's also the year I got married. So we had lots of activity that year, building a feedlot, getting married, and carried on from there. So we've grew from that number in 1974, where the feedlot handled 200 head, to where now we have capacity to hold between 8,000 and 9,000 head at home when everything is full. Our numbers will be not consistent because we do some binge buying. We buy cattle, a lot of cattle spring and fall. We background a pile of cattle at home. We background some cattle that have some relationships that we developed over the years for people that background for us. And everything comes home except for 2 places where the cattle are finished away from home at other people's places. Everything else is finished at home. As was mentioned, we take and produce about 13 million pounds of beef a year. Our crop rotation is a very intricate part of our risk management as far as I'm concerned. Your soil has to be left for the next generation as well as received it. And I feel that we are leaving our soil in a lot better position than every year. It's improving its productivity. And the crops that we grow, was mentioned, we crop about 5,000 acres. We have 2,300 acres of corn, 1,300 acres of wheat, 500 acres of edible beans, 400 acres of barley, and 700 acres of hay. So all our land is tiled, and so it all gets rotated. It all receives manure, not every year, but all our ground has manure due to it. And so we have about 5,200 acres worth of crops around home here. And then we have 400 acres of pasture around home that is all rotated. And then at Manitoulin Island, we pasture about 900 acres up there that's fertilized and rotated, and have, excuse me, about 1,300 to 1,400 yearlings up there that come home in the fall to be put in the yard. They get backgrounded in the west, come down in the spring then, and be pastured on the island. As I mentioned before, we background a lot of cattle. So we take and try to spread our risk out by not buying very many heavy cattle. We do buy some 900 or 1,000 pounds if we see a spot that we're going to miss marketing cattle in. We market cattle pretty well 52 weeks of the year. We might miss a week or two, but as a rule, we're marketing cattle every week of the year. All family members have cattle. My wife has cattle, my son, my daughter. I've got 4 grandchildren that have cattle. I feel it's very important that everybody has a piece of the pie as far as knowing what the numbers are. And I think it's a great way for the next generation to own some cattle, know what interest costs are, and get a feeling of what this business is like. If they want to be in it, that's great. And if they don't, that's fine too. The opportunity is there for them. But so we have 4 grandchildren at present time that do own cattle. Our diversification is all revolved around cattle. Our crops are all grown and taken and fed to the cattle, except for the edible beans. And then the wheat is grew for the straw, but we will market the wheat unless the wheat price gets so bad that it's not, or we've got it run into problems with falling numbers or with sprouts or something like that, then it'll end up being fed. We take and also, as I mentioned before, our manure is spread on all the crops, or ground is rotated very much. Soil testing is done a lot, and we will every year we will produce about 26 to 27,000 ton of solid manure, and then between 10 and 11 million gallon of liquid manure. Nutrient management is very important to utilize what the value of that manure is. So when you're growing a crop, that you're not wasting fertilizer or over fertilizing. So that's another thing to take and make sure you're on top of, know what the value of manure is, and make sure the guys that are spreading your manure for you are doing a consistent job, and that the manure is being spread evenly, and making it that it is spread evenly, so fertility across the field is done right. Crop wise, sounds like a lot of acres that we are growing crop, but we actually, my dad worked on the theory that if you grow half and buy half, and that was when we had a lot less numbers, a lot less acres, you would likely just be as far ahead. And we hold the same theory today. In fact, as far as our energy needs, we only grow about 40% of it. We buy 6% of the corn that we need. We feed about 30,000 ton of corn a year. So and that's a real good hedge or risk management. We're either half right or half wrong when we're buying it, and when growing half, and you can't. That's just as good as giving money to the futures market, as far as I'm concerned. As I mentioned before, our pastures are all rotated, both on the island and at home here, and fertilizer spread on them to try and increase our yield, or pounds per acre that's on that. Machinery. Machinery has to justify ownership. We don't buy a lot of new machinery. Our tractors and loaders are new equipment. Our forage harvester, we keep new. We just barely can own a forage harvester. The acres that we cover just is enough to take and justify ownership of a harvester. Other than that, it's an only new piece, plus the tractors and loaders. Combines are all used. Tillage equipment was used. Tractors are bidirectional tractors or tillage tractors are all used. We let somebody else take the first hit on depreciation. We do a lot of maintenance. We have our own shop. We have our own licensed mechanic. Another way of keeping dollars within house. Another thing that I think you have to take and know is your costs. You need to know what your yardage costs are, your interest costs, your depreciation costs, your feed costs. Do closeouts on the cattle. Every pen of cattle here has a closeout on it, and what the feed conversion is, what the dry matter intake. All them numbers are critical to know what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes there's some big surprises in pens that you think should work, and you'll get a surprise where they don't, and then you'll trace it back, and you'll usually find something that's taken and upset that closeout. Another thing in our operation is, and I think it's needs to be looked at, is we have 11 to 12 employees, and the risk associated with employees. Employees are a very important part of our operation. There's nothing I like better to hear an employee come up to me and say, what are we going to be doing this year for capital expense, or what are we doing animal health wise different, or what are we going to tie fertility wise different, or are we doing anything different? Like when the employees take ownership or pride in where they're working is a very nice feeling for a person that's been in this business as long as I have, because it makes, they feel that they're part of that operation. And we have employees that have been with us, quite a few employees that have been with us over 15 years, and one that's been with us for 35. So them type of employees are very dedicated to your operation. And when you need that extra time of the year, when you need that extra hours put in, they're there to do it free, and it's greatly appreciated, and they need to be rewarded for doing that, and we try to do that. I think that kind of takes and brings me kind of just to sums up pretty well what I think has helped make our operation be a success, is that everybody's cup of tea to do what we're doing. Not likely. I never envisioned 50 years ago that I thought 200 or 300 cattle would likely cut it. I never thought we'd be to where we are today, but I have opportunity to grow and family members that wanted to be involved, so we took advantage of that. So I'll leave it at that, and I think that maybe sums up what I have to say.